Today I really want to make a video on October 7th, but it's really hard to build up confidence for it. Whenever this day is talked about, it's talked about in a vacuum, and yet if it was in a vacuum, it would be in a vacuum that was allowed to build up for 80 years. So we're going to be addressing a lot of criticisms, but we are also going to be addressing the tragedy that it was for both sides of the conflict. On October 7th, at minimum 1,200 Hamas gunmen broke into nearby settlements after destroying the wall in a couple different locations with a bulldozer, some drones, and some explosives. And in the following hours, you had a couple thousand Gazans crossing into Israel through those locations. In the terror, the rape, the destruction, the pillaging of Israeli settlements that were next to them, resulting in the death of 1,200 Israelis, 250 being soldiers, and 850 or so being innocent people. And it is worth noting that Hamas gunmen and Gazans kidnapped about 250 Israelis that day. Now, for a moment, I do want to sit on that because I think both sides could agree that for the overall best outlook for this conflict, that was the worst event that could have happened in regards to resolving a good future. It curb stomped the peace process possibly entirely. If Yasser Arafat,
all the mayor who had born in Russia, have the right to live here, in this area, in Jerusalem, more than me, you accept it as a human being. As a human being, do you accept it? I am asking all the world. And in spite of this, I am saying that let us live together. Equality, peace, and justice.
denying the two-state solution because there would never be allowed an army and because the right to return for the 8 million people outside would not be allowed, then something like this makes it really hard for the Israelis who have never been able to look at what their side does and self-reflect to be able to self-reflect. This just gives them exactly what we saw to happen. Where in the following, from October 7th to April 2024, 42,000 Palestinians had died. There's a very big difference there, I think, and that's just a couple months after. What we immediately heard in the aftermath was the beheading babies, was the babies in ovens, the ZAKA claims, and pro-Israeli people and governments around the world inflaming that story as a means to justify what has already been going on for so long.
Talking children, 2 piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death. This is something behind, this is next level. And
I mean, it's actually indescribable, really. It's indescribable, really.
It's indescribable, and I won't describe everything that I saw. We go further. Then we see a woman. She was lying on the floor, a puddle of blood, big puddle of blood. She was a pregnant woman. Her stomach was butchered open. The baby that was connected to the cord was stabbed, and she was shot in the back.
Kibbutz Be'eri has denied this account.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
Like they did before, do everything, cutting babies' heads off to burning women and children alive.
Misinformation has been used, and sometimes deliberate disinformation has been used by official spokespersons.
אבל אנחנו צריכים לקנות זמן. זמן אנחנו קונים על ידי הפנייה גם למנהיגים וגם לדעת הקהל. ויש לכם חלק חשוב.
Israeli authorities have already came out and claimed those stories are false at this point 3 years later. But it's already done the damage that was needed to help get us to the point where the Western world sees Gazans cheering on Israelis brought back, and we think of these people as terroristic or evil, or we can't understand how they celebrate the murders that happened that day. And yet, how did we feel when we lost 3,000 people to Saudi Arabians and Egyptians, and then we proceeded to kill 1 million Iraqis? The blowback for that is a lot of Iraqis hating America, and that is exactly the same for the 80 years of conflict, where the stealing of land, the destruction, the bombings, the night raids, the 5,000 200 people being held in prison before October 7th, the sponge bombing of towns before October 7th. So when we see it from a jaded perspective of 1 or 2 days in a vacuum, it was a vacuum that's been building up for 80 years. When we elect people like Ariel Sharon, the architect of the Shatila and Sabra massacre, which was the genocidal killing of 2,000 to 4,000 Palestinian, mostly civilians, Christians, and Lebanon Shiites. In 2 days, they massacred that many people in Beirut neighborhoods of Sabra and the Shatila refugee camp nearby.
By right-wing Christian militias after the Israeli invasion in 1982. And further down, in the southern suburbs of Beirut, Burj al-Barajneh, covering about a square mile. Burj al-Barajneh, like other Palestinian refugee camps, was built by people who fled the new state of Israel in 1948. It's always been a sort of state within a state itself.
You become incapable, really, of reacting further. I mean, you just take it in and say, that's where we are. But I think it encourages in me, and I think in most Palestinians who have watched or heard about this, the will to resist further. I mean, that we mustn't let this simply take place and these people be effaced. We must continue to fight and to struggle towards something that will take us out of this, and that Burj al-Barajneh and Shatila and Sabra and all the other deadliest, I mean, it's a whole string of these catastrophes in our histories, have to end up somewhere that isn't just another catastrophe.
And prior to the Sabra and Shatila massacre, Mossad head officials, through leaked records, were not only coercing Lebanese officials and aware of what was to occur, but in meetings between the Israeli intelligence and Lebanese forces high leaders, as early as January 1982, discussed several Deir Yassins and turning Sabra into a zoo and Shatila Beirut's parking place, all while knowing the PLO, at that time the Radical Palestinian Group, had already withdrawn Lebanon that year prior, leaving civilians being the ones to suffer that. That came from Mossad chief Yitzhak Hofi and Lebanese force leader Bashir Gemayel. And when Ariel Sharon is forced to resign after the Lebanon, Sabra, and Shatila massacre goes public, all that really bad publicity comes his way, was elected in 2001. 20 years later, he's the architect behind pulling out of Gaza so they could focus on Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. And I brought up how it'd be nice if Israelis could self-reflect earlier. And the reason that we sat on Ariel Sharon so long is because time and time again, we hear as if he was a benevolent man. Because in 2005, they backed out of Gaza, and that was such a great thing that they did for Gazans, right guys? Except there was an ulterior goal there. Ariel Sharon's chief advisor, Dov Wiseglass, in 2005 had said, the significance of the disengagement plan is the freezing of the peace process, and when you freeze the process, you prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state, and you prevent a discussion on the refugees, the borders, Jerusalem. Effectively, this whole package called the Palestinian state, with all that entails, has been removed from the agenda. And with this, the United States presidential blessing and the ratification of both of the Congresses, the disengagement's actually formaldehyde. It supplies the amount of formaldehyde that's necessary so there will not be a political process with the Palestinians. That was the chief advisor to Ariel Sharon at the time. And this was the butcher of Beirut. So I'm really just pointing out that both sides have reasons to hate each other. Although, like my dad said the other day, it's kind of a cowboys and Indians situation. So when we think of Hamas as terroristic people, and so since you voted in terrorists,
finish them. Don't ever forget what happened.
Even though 50% of Gaza at that time is children, and they won by 44% at a 75% turnout, meaning they had barely half the votes. And even if that is cherry picking, then we could go down a long list of people who have been very rabid and have been idolized in Israeli culture. I would hope that we could agree that both the Israeli government and Hamas do not want peace in these situations. The problem is keeping these people in an open-air prison for 25 years that they cannot leave on any side, sanctioned from the world. Not only that, but events like Protective Edge killing 2,100 Palestinians in 2014 and 70 Israelis. Or Cast Lead killing 1,391 Palestinians and 13 Israelis in 2009. Cast Lead, Protective Edge, Defensive Shield, those were regardless of civilian destruction. Those were carpet bombings onto Gaza. we need to get on topic. And so we're going to go back to some criticisms and some things that I really need to bring up about October 7th. I think the most important thing to talk about first when it comes to these criticisms, the day was already so bad. They didn't have to exaggerate or make claims when multiple thousand Gazans storm through into the closest settlements and start killing civilians. That's already a tragedy for both sides of the conflict. I think what's sad about that is when you already have tragedies that we could all agree to, that we get these stories that are very clearly not true.
15 burned people, among them 8 babies.
Did you see?
I evacuated.
The list of the dead shows that there were no babies in the house.
That are fueled by the media because biasy towards one side of the conflict. And even this year, we're still seeing those claims being spread and used by mainstream publications. Because we could agree, the day is already a tragedy, and that those people didn't have to die for it. Now that we've addressed some of the important things too before we could actually criticize things, let's start criticizing things. Starting with the Hannibal Directive. It basically meant that whenever there was an Israeli soldier who was possibly going to be kidnapped by militants, to kill them, that way that they can't be used to negotiate later. Because oftentimes, at least especially in this conflict, you would see trades of 10 or so people being done for a couple hundred. So the Israelis do not want to have that major blowback where they have to give a couple hundred prisoners for a couple people. This became a controversial thing quite quick when it came to be found that it was reinstated to be used in the early hours of October 7th. Both the Nova Festival and especially the Kibbutz Be'eri incident where there was clear tank fire into a building that killed 13 Israeli civilians.
המסוק יורה. עליכם. זרועות יורה עלינו ואני בטוחה שזהו. זה עכשיו אני מתה וגמרנו ואז אני מרימה את הראש ואני בחיים. מחבלים נהרגו מהים. כל המחבלים נהרגו. לא נשאר אחד בחיים. והם הביאו פתאום טנק, והיא אומרת לאחד החיילים, תגיד, אבל אם אתם אומרים פגזים זה לא יפגע בבני הערובה? אז הוא אומר לי, לא, אנחנו רק עושים את זה בצדדים, להוריד קירות.
בא לראות טנק בתוך בארי, עושה על הכביש. הופה, היה שם איזה ירי.
And my next point of contention would be if we have to kill every Palestinian in Gaza because of Hamas.
For beheading of a child, the proportional response, total destruction to the last one of the Hamas.
מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם, ואנחנו...
עובדים בערבית כל יום שהחטופים אצלם, שכונה מושמדת, על יושביה, אין משהו אחר. אם מישהו רוצה לדבר איתי על זה שאני אכזרי, שיקרא לי אכזרי.
אין בתים, אין חקלאות, אין כלום. אין להם בתים.
רעב וצמא אצל האוכלוסייה העזתית. לא נצליח לגייס משת"פ, לא נצליח לגייס מודיעין, לא נצליח לשחד אנשים באוכל, בשתייה, בתרופות.
יש לחץ בינלאומי והוא גובר, אבל דווקא כשהלחץ הבינלאומי גובר, אנחנו צריכים לצופף את השורות בינינו. אנחנו חייבים לעמוד יחד מול הניסיונות לעצור את המלחמה.
This wasn't just rape, this was flat out torture.
I don't think there's any way Israel can be expected to coexist or find some diplomatic off-ramp.
1,154 people were killed on October 7. After 5 months of bombardment, around 31,000 are confirmed killed in Gaza. 27% are adult men, 29% adult women, and 44% children.
It was October 22nd, and my family were sleeping in their home. There was my father, my older brother, his wife, and his 3 children. There was also my younger brother, and there were my older sister, Wala, and 4 of her children. And there was my sister Ala and her children. And there was my sister Aya and her 3 children. And they were sleeping at 5 a.m. in the morning when Israel bombed my home. And they were killed. 21 of them were killed.
If we have to kill every Palestinian in Gaza because of Hamas, why has Israel been funding Hamas since 1970 as a way to quell the secular, not religious PLO? They were funding Hamas up to a year before Sabra Shatila and only stopping when Hamas attacked Israel for the first time, only to start funding them again when Netanyahu went into government. And it's not that I could give the perfect answer for what they should do after October 7th. But they definitely should not kill 52,000 people in 6 months after 1,400 people die as a result of you holding them in occupation for 25 years, putting their ancestors there 80 years ago, and sanctioning them for 20 years. The responsible party is the occupiers, is the people with power, the people that are welcomed by 160 different countries by the world. Now, the next thing that I want to know is that the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt all warned that the attack was imminent due to the Gaza blockade, and that through just looking at the Hamas preparation training videos, it's quite clear what they're training for. And yet all this information was ignored, despite numerous warnings and stand-down orders being given to Israeli soldiers on October 7th, allowing for the overtaking, with some Israeli soldiers testifying that from like 5:20 to 9 a.m. that they were told to stand down from their border patrol routine. And another thing that's worth noting is the night before October 7th, when dozens and dozens of SM chips and phones are being turned on and activated that weren't known in the area prior, that sends off red alerts to Israel, and that went off the night before. Saudi Arabia vaguely warned that the continued occupation without any progress would blow, and Unit 8200 warned the day before that weaponry and equipment was moving in Gaza. So there's so many signs that things were about to go bad, and yet there were stand-down orders the next morning. All I'm saying is that it plays into the palms of the policy of this government. Now, the next point of contention that I want to get into is the Abraham Accords. Donald Trump, in his first term, establishing the Abraham Accords really acts as a means to bypass the Israel-Palestine conflict as a way of negotiating with other Arab Muslim countries while trying to deal with their populations who are not happy with it. I want to show you something from 2016.
In fact, the only time that the United States cast a UN Security Council veto during the Obama presidency was against an anti-Israel resolution in 2011. As President Obama rightly declared at this podium, peace will not come from statements and resolutions at the United Nations. I believe the day is not far off when Israel will be able to rely on many, many countries to stand with us at the UN. Slowly but surely, the days when UN ambassadors reflexively condemn Israel, those days are coming to an end.
Led, or a majority, were civilians. Effective edge was 2,100, and they said that 1,000 of them were terrorists. I'm sorry that we find war crimes grotesque, asshole. Now, I do want to show you Netanyahu at the UN September 22nd, 2 weeks before October 7th.
Because they were based on one false idea, that unless we first concluded a peace agreement with the Palestinians, no other Arab state would normalize its relations with Israel. I've long sought to make peace with the Palestinians, but I also believed that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states. There's no question. The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace.
The Abraham Accords, at least in my opinion, did quite a bit to escalate any attacks Hamas would have done onto Israel. And for the record, I do think that Hamas needs to go. They end up putting Palestinians in terrible positions in the same way that the Israeli government puts Israelis in terrible positions. The indiscriminate carpet bombing, the dehumanization, and the justification with bullshit excuses and no acknowledgement of wrongdoing is not the way to solve the problem, and it's only going to get people to think this is the Fourth Reich, especially when we see the way you treat them. And the last thing that I want to bring up for this, what do we expect? Quite frankly, when the peaceful march in 2018, in a hopes to be allowed in by 6,000 to 7,000 Palestinians, by 1,000 were gunned down, and the IDF released statements saying every bullet hit the terrorists, Meanwhile, it's hitting people in wheelchairs. It's hitting children with flags up.
Hello guys, this is Ahmed Ghunaim. We're here in the Great March of Return in the Gaza Strip. Friday is usually the day where everybody meets up. Tens of thousands of people from all over the Gaza Strip injured, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, and 47 dead. Amongst the 47 dead, there are 2 journalists, 5 children, and 2 disabled men. And the injuries, the thousands of injuries, range from rubber bullets to live ammunition and tear gas.
لابد أن تفهم دولة الاحتلال فهما حقيقيا وسياسيا واضحا أيضا أنها لا يمكن أن تحجز الناس هنا في طنجرة ضغط وتشعل النار من تحته ولا تتوقع أن هذا الشعب سينفجر في وجهها.
Just a quick fact here, all the smoke that you see is from burning tires. So the Palestinians, they put burning tires here, and that's to deter the Israeli snipers from shooting people, so they can't see. We've been here around 4 hours, but as you can see, everyone's leaving. On Monday and Tuesday, it's expected to be even bigger. There won't even be space to see the ground. That's how many people will be here on Monday and Tuesday, because there will be a lot of things going on. The first day of Ramadan, there will be the anniversary of the Nakba, and also Trump's official move to change the embassy, to move the US embassy to Jerusalem. So all this, of course, is a mad provocation that will essentially inspire more and more of these young Gazans to come out and protest for their right to return and against the land, air, and sea blockade of the Strip.
The Great March in 2018 was a tragedy. Quite frankly, what do you expect these people to do? Not only when you continue the West Bank stealing of land, while these people have no way to help out their family in the West Bank and their people in the West Bank, they themselves are in hell. What do you expect? That is really the last thing that I will say. History just doesn't matter, I guess. If anything, lastly, if one side kills a bunch of your civilians, the answer is not killing a bunch of civilians on the other side. That's for sure.
Palestinian struggle is not just a cry for justice. It's a blistering battle for the most fundamental human rights that every living soul on this planet should inherit by birthright.